I will guide through my patient, I will guide them through an introspection where they will meet all of the layers of their emotions, which usually are suppressed in their body. They are all very important, each of them, but usually deep down in our body, because we were basically conditioned not to be honest with our emotions, not to express them, partly because they might cause a problem. You might hurt someone. So from childhood, we were basically told not to cry. It's no time for that. Just pretend that everything is okay. So therefore we have lots of suppressed emotions, and what they do in the body, they release a chemical cocktail through the bloodstream. And this special chemical reaction, because every emotion has its own chemical reaction in the body, so through the bloodstream they go to certain cell receptors and they will block them. And where these blocked cell receptors are, when illness happens, it is where these blocked cell receptors are found in the body. So because they make the rest of the cells unable to communicate with each other healthily. And conversely, it is also true that when we allow these emotions to come up to the surface and feel them, like children do, very naturally, very spontaneously, they don't hold back anything, then this chemical reaction does not happen. Then everything still remains open, the cell receptors remain open, and there's a healthy cellular communication going on. So that's really a big difference. So that's why it is so important to not repress them, but to embrace them, to feel them, to let them come to the surface and approach them in our own way. And there are two very different approaches. One of them, both are good, by the way, but I will tell you, one of them is when you kind of distance yourself from the emotion by noticing it, by naming it, giving it a name, and then maybe even ask yourself, what am I feeling now? What's here right now? And then feel the emotion and name it and ask questions. And sometimes this already is enough to deal with the emotion. And the other approach is the so-called tantric approach. This was the former one was the Vedantic approach, and the tantric approach is that you don't distance yourself from the emotion, but you totally merge yourself with the emotions, to let it be you, let it merge with you, become one with it. And if you do that, you probably notice that there is no questions or naming, or because you are annihilated, you let it annihilate you, be it a fear or an anger or some strong emotion that we usually repress. Now you allow it to come and you burn in the fire of the fear. So you literally maybe even shaking, but you don't stop allowing it. And if you do that, then you will experience at the end that if you don't speak about it, if you don't try to avoid it or repress it, or you don't practice any avoidance strategies with it, then it just comes and goes. So this is how you, get over it. All right, you don't touch it.
Unmute yourself, Kia.
Yeah, Kia, we can't hear you.
Hold on. Sorry, my kid was running back and forth, and I want you to hear that. So I muted myself. But anyway, mom life. So I have questions. I had to stop you there before we go too far.
Sure,
and also,
sure.
Carla had a question, who is watching on YouTube. Thanks for subscribing, Carla. I appreciate you. And she says those emotional layers can really shock you when you start uncovering them.
Hi, Carla.
What cautions should people be aware of before doing this kind of work? So let's answer that one first.
Yeah. So what cautions should people be aware of before doing this kind of work? Well,
great question.
It's good to know that these emotions are always surprising. You cannot prepare for them. So in the session, you never really know what comes up, but whatever comes up means that it is safe for you to meet it, because otherwise it wouldn't come up, So it is safe to deal with it. You won't die into it. When I say you let it annihilate you, then I don't mean it literally. You will still be alive after encountering that emotion, obviously. But that's the way to not cause that chemical reaction into your body, to then not block those cell receptors, which then might cause an illness later on. So it's
that was my
very
question.
important. Yeah.
That was my question, because you said that when we have these emotions that come up, each of these emotions, they give you a chemical reaction in your body, right? And so what I was going to ask is, if we don't allow ourselves to feel these feelings and express these emotions in either of the ways that you were describing, could we get physically ill? And could you explain a little bit more about that?
Definitely we could, because the science has noticed that when we repress these emotions and don't let them just be here and meet them, then this certain biochemical reaction blocks these cell receptors, and in that act of repressing them, these chemical reaction happens and block these cell receptors, meaning that they won't be able to communicate with the other cells in the body. And that's where illness happens. Dr. Deepak Chopra, who probably everybody knows that he's a very famous spiritual teacher today, but he used to be a surgeon, the chief surgeon, working in a hospital for many years. And what he was looking at a long list of patients who healed miraculously. It's called spontaneous healing or spontaneous remission. And he was not looking at the cause of the death, which usually the allopathic medical researchers looking at, what caused this illness and what happened, when basically they are looking in the direction of death. But he was looking, what is the common denominator in terms of these patients who healed miraculously? So what is, and he found two very common factors. And one of them was that they were able to access that part of us which makes our hair grow, which makes our eyes shine. That awareness, they by somehow by act of grace or by spontaneous, just healing, they were able to access that. And not just they were able to access that, but that was the second common factor, but they were also able to not just get access to the cell memory, but then release it, let it go, and they got healed. But these all happened by an act of grace to these people. So they were not consciously going to that, tapping into that awareness. And that's what we do in this session, for example, in this healing work, that we consciously go to that place in our body, because everything is awareness in the body, around the body as well, but in the body, everything is awareness, the cells, the space in between the cells, everything. So they were able to tap into that awareness and then release what was in the cells, stored in the cells. And let me speak about that as well. So the cell memories, what is that and how does that work? And then when they tapped into it, they were releasing the memory that was stored there, and then forgave, and then healing happened. So that was the two common denominator in terms of the miraculous healing. So we can learn a lot from that. And Brandon Bays, who wrote this book back then, The Journey. Can you see that? Yeah. You
There
can
we go.
find it. You can find it anywhere in America or around the world. That's just more details about this healing work. And so that the cell memory means that whatever happened to us in our lives, everything is stored in our body. Everything. So when something bad happened, that's also obviously there. And because whatever good happened to us, and by the way, embracing our good emotions is not a problem ever. But but when some trauma happens, it's also stored in the cells. That's what's called cell memory. And what does it have to do with healing? Well, that whatever is stored in there, if you can have access to it, and that's what Brandon realized, that you can know all about the science, but if there's no method, step-by-step method, how can you access that awareness, that cell memory, so that you can then release it and let it go, and then you can go by heal, right? And so there's another piece of science that says that every of our organs, or each of our organs, regenerate itself within various speed, right? So for example, the eyes regenerate itself within 24, 48 hours. That's the quickest. So within less than 2 days, you have a completely new inner eyeball, which is amazing. Or the skin, the skin, when you have a suntan, and after 3 weeks, that suntan just slough off, and then that means that the old cells are gone. So the skin cells regenerate themselves within 3 weeks. Or the liver, it's 6 weeks. Or the stomach, it's 3 days. Within 3 days, you have a completely new stomach lining. So then the scientists then asked, and this was Deepak Chopra wrote this book, The Quantum Healing, at the end of the 80s. So I'm talking about many years ago, more than 30 years ago. It was a cutting edge science back then. So then they asked, okay, so that's how all our cells are regenerating. So within 1 year, you don't have any more cells which you had today, So after 1 year, everything regenerated itself. But then how come that if you had, let's say, a liver cancer in the beginning of this year, you will still find it now after several months? How come when the liver regenerates its cells within 6 weeks, right? So that was a very logical question to ask. And what they found, that before the old degenerative cell dies, it passes on its memory, the old consciousness which is stored in there, it passes on to the new cell generation. So in other words, the new cells will be an exact replica of the old one, right? So this is how the old cell passes on its memory to the new cell generation, and that's why after many months that cancer is still there. So what is the way then to remove that, right? To work with that cell memory? Well, if you don't want to wait until something spontaneous happens, an act of grace happens or something like that, like happened to that many patients who healed miraculously, then you need a method that is a step-by-step method that will then guide you through this process, and you can consciously reach into that place in you where you can tap into that consciousness. You get access to that old memory, that degenerative cell memory. And if you release it, let it go and forgive, then the new cell generation will not inherit that old memory, that old consciousness.
Oh, wow. What do you think about that, Kaula?
Actually, it's it's a